Welcome to Book Club for Movies, everybody. It's February 14th. I'm Ryan Miller, and he'd vote for Obama a third time if he could. It's Matt Hamburg.
Hey, you. I'm not going to lie. Get out.
On Book Club for Movies. On Book Club for In Book Club, how do you get out of Book Club for Movies, everybody? This week, where we watch one movie, we talk about it, and you can too. Send us an email at podcast@bookclubformovies.com or Facebook, Twitter us. It's up to you. This week, it's Get Out. Matt wasn't just being rude to me, and he does have a synopsis for it.
I do.
I assume.
Get Out, starring, written, directed, produced, musical guest, Dave Coulier. All right.
What is happening?
Cut it out. Get it out.
Oh, I see. Going in the complete widest direction you could from the movie we're going to talk about.
That's right. That movie is Get Out. It comes in an hour and 44 minutes. Written and directed by Jordan Peele. Starring Daniel Kaluuya, Allison Williams, Bradley Whitford, and Catherine Keener. Here is your Book Club for Movies synopsis for Get Out. When a young black man is taken to his white girlfriend's family home for a weekend, tensions begin to rise as he realizes something isn't right about them, their friends, or the tea, and that above all else, he needs to get out.
I like how you're including the titles in the synopsis.
I've been trying to work them in a little bit more. It's
Nice.
been fun.
I appreciate it.
Because I like it when they say the name of the movie.
It's the best part of the movie.
It's always is.
Did you see that? There's a YouTube supercut of it out there. Did you send that to me, or did I just see that somewhere?
Anything is humanly possible in this world.
Okay. Look it up. YouTube supercut of people saying the title of the movie in the movie.
Huge fan.
Incredibly satisfying. It might itself be my favorite movie.
You know what? Throw it on the big screen. Alamo Drafthouse. $15.
Get Out also might be my favorite movie, actually. I'm going to get out in front of this. Wow.
Fun to come into this a little bit later.
But also what we should get out in front of is, so I've said in the past, and I think this is a quote from Stephen King, probably, in that if a story can be spoiled, it might not be a good story to begin with. Mm-hmm. I think there's some wisdom in there, and it's fun to have a discussion about that. This is a fantastic story that I think might still be able to be spoiled in a way. It doesn't make it any less worth watching, but it's such a... I myself got so invested in understanding what was happening, even though, and maybe this is where Jordan Peele himself actually proves that quote correct, even though it's a little bit telegraphed, like what you think might be going on is going on, but you don't have the whole story, and it's just amazing the way it plays out and what it actually is. So we're going to spoil it because we spoil every movie we talk about, and this movie's been out forever.
Yeah, at least a year.
But I wanted to say that at the top of the show, just because if you haven't seen this yet, like I hadn't seen this yet, go see it.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even stop this and go watch it right now. I'd be fine with that too. In fact, that's almost what I did. I watched it like an hour ago. I just barely finished it. In fact, less than that, actually. It's been a long week. If you haven't heard our Isle of Dogs show yet, it's because it's not out. I've had a big long, I had to work over the weekend, and actually I had to work so much that I forgot I didn't edit the show.
Sure.
It's half done, and it's out by the time you're hearing this.
Right.
But in any event, I've just finished watching Get Out. So my thoughts are going to be a little less. I like at least having a night. I like sleeping on the movies we get to watch. I usually watch them minimum the day before. I haven't had that. So I might be a little scattered, number one.
Okay.
Number two, everything that goes on in this movie, like this is such a landmark movie in so many freaking ways, not the least of which probably being with how it deals with race issues from the point of view of Jordan Peele, right? You know, a man who knows firsthand about them. We do not, but we try.
And that's your preface.
So give us enough rope to hang ourselves. That's all I'm saying. Okay.
I'm pretty sure the magic of editing is going to come into play here somewhere.
Oh, it always does.
I hope that at some point while you're making these terrible, like having to deal with these terrible decisions, you'll do an edit. You'll do an edit with that like that chime sound, that you know, like to go from
the Wayne's World like
yeah,
flashback.
That whole thing. Yeah.
Yep. Get Out is a fantastic movie. It's an amazing movie. It's not even joking when I say it might be one of my favorite movies. Let's still go at it chronologically, perhaps.
Sure.
Did you want to add to any of that history? I know you saw it long, long ago.
I did see it long ago. We saw it in the theater. It was a great movie.
Okay.
I like the movie a lot. I think it's a great horror movie. It's a great satire in terms of what he's pulling off, which, you know, satirical horror movies are terrific, always fun to watch.
Not even this terrific normally. Like, I love him, yes.
Oh no, sure, but this is.
In fact, speaking of which, the dad, you know the actor's name, the guy that plays the dad here.
Bradley Whitford.
Thank you. Was he also in
Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Correct.
Yes, he was in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Thank you. That's definitely what I'm going for first and foremost with any reference like that. But no, he was in Cabin in the Woods, right?
Yeah, he was.
Satirical.
He was.
Horror,
He
right?
was in Cabin in the Woods for sure. Yeah,
So.
Probably the best part of that movie, actually.
Cabin in the. We can have a Cabin in the Woods discussion at some other time.
Sure, sounds good.
We've got too much to do here, and if you listen to Tuesday's show, we move pretty quick. We're going to try to move quick here. That might just be in that we don't do a rest of the show where we talk about other movies, but we'll see. For now, let's get into it. How about that?
I like it. We're getting into it.
The first act, I think maybe we can move pretty quickly through.
Sure.
Not only because it's covered beautifully by your synopsis, but because it lays groundwork like a good first act does. It lays groundwork more than anything. The second and third act are such just literal mind-blowing pieces of film that I feel bad for the first act in a way, but it's good. It's good. It's there and it's done amazingly. It is a girl and her black boyfriend going to see her parents. She hasn't told them that he's black, but they're super cool, quote unquote. He would have voted for Obama a third time if he could, quote unquote, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
They get there, and along the way, they hit a deer, and it kind of bleeds out on the side of the road. There's a moment. It's where kind of death and blood are introduced to the film for the first time, but it's not overt. You know, it is meaningful, you can tell, because this film is directed fantastically. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, look, man, this is Jordan Peele understands this all too well, that comedy and horror are very, very similar in how they work out. Like they're very like in how they build and stuff and reveals and how you create these moments that make another thing funnier, or in this case scarier or more pointed. And right. And with all the time he spent doing that comedy, that translates directly to this, especially after you find out that the guy is a horror fanatic. Like, he's a freak, and it's awesome.
Yeah, and not only do you get that, but I think you also get, because I'm sure there were a lot of people that were maybe didn't know him as well, or knew him from a YouTube Key and Peele's skit that their friend showed them on their phone at some point. But I think this is also a good indicator that you can be funny and funnier when you understand what you're satirizing better.
Sure.
You know, like
sure.
this is why a lot of good comedians come from a great, you know, this is part of the reason you love comedians like Conan O'Brien, who are freaking just smart people, just brilliant people, you know? And you know, I'm not saying that stupid people can't be funny too. Look at us. But
I try not to.
Jordan Peele has such a just mastery of directing, period. Not directing horror, not directing comedy. He just knows what he's doing, and it's allowed him to do stuff like this and stuff like Key and Peele even. Mm-hmm. The directing is great. They get to the house. It's laid on pretty thick. The dad has a lot of lines about, he does, number one, drop that line firsthand about voting for Obama a third time if he could. But he also talks about traveling to other cultures and how much of a privilege it is. He talks about how Jesse Owens, his father, I think was a sprinter as well or something like that, and he didn't qualify because Jesse Owens qualified, but then he drops the whole Hitler at the Olympics thing, and that guy sucked, and etc. I'm paraphrasing.
That sounds exactly like Bradley Whitford.
But he lays it on pretty thick, and then tosses off a comment as they walk by the basement door and says, "Oh, we had to lock that up because of the black mold in the basement," and then moves on. Right?
Yeah.
Tossed off comment, right?
Sure.
But what that first act does also with all that, after laying it on thick and those tossed off comments, it does a great job of creating an uneasy atmosphere. It is seemingly normal. They're breadcrumbs. There's a lot of breadcrumbs, and they're laid out very purposefully and very deftly by Peele.
And something I want to point out here that I think builds and helps with that unease is there are some really, really, really great cinematography choices, some shot choices.
Gorgeous, yeah.
And one of the things that sets the movie in that really uncomfortable moment, and I think this works on a couple of different levels, and for legitimately anybody watching the movie, I think you kind of feel that like the house and everything around them is filmed in a very bright, clear, like white, very, very white. Like there's lots of white around them. But it's that like there is this like it's not well,
it's not any one thing either. Like the cinematography, the color palette even is changed throughout, and I love movies that do this. For the textbook least subtle example, look at The Matrix. Like everything in The Matrix is green, everything in the real world is blue. Look, I made a movie. And I love The Matrix. Don't get me wrong, but he does that cinematographically.
Yeah, but it's like there's this. At the beginning, the house is very sterile. Like it's very. Sterile is like the only word I can give you, but it's one of those like.
No, yeah, I'm with you.
It's an unease, partially because of how everything looks and the way we're being drawn into the house and the way things are shot behind him and in front. Like it's just a really well filmed movie, and it is.
No, we could do a whole cast on that, honestly. Like,
and it adds a lot to the atmosphere. Yeah,
definitely. And I don't want to undersell the first act. It is more than window dressing. It is more than laying the foundation. Like I said, the breadcrumbs are great. Maybe the two that stand out the most are, again, when they hit the deer, but also there's a cop that shows up after the deer who asks for his license, and she's like, "No, you don't need to see his license. Like, that's garbage." Calls him out on it. The cop backs off and leaves. But it very early on asks the question or sets the stage for casual racism type thing, right? Mm-hmm. And especially coming at this movie, I'm sure there's a lot of people like, "Oh, it's a movie about racism." Okay, I couldn't undersell it more because in meeting the family and in going through a lot of that, because like I said, the dad lays it on pretty thick. That the first act ends with them in the bedroom and her basically apologizing for her parents and saying that they're just as bad as the cop was. They basically admitting, okay, and he looks at her while she's saying all this, like, "I can't believe like this, that, and the other." And he's just looking at her like, yeah, okay. And she's like, "What?" She's like, basically says, "I told you so." Basically like, yeah, this is the thing you have no idea about. There's no such thing almost as casual racism, I guess, but we might be getting ahead of ourselves with that. Not because it's not true, but because we're not there in the movie yet.
Thank you for clarifying.
Also, because that sounds really bad if you come at it from the other direction.
Sure.
Okay. All right. You know what?
You're digging yourself into a hole here, and I'm not sure. Like
I hope I'm not.
All I want to say is that this is your opinion, and I have nothing to do with it.
The opinions of this podcaster are not necessarily representative of this other podcaster.
That's correct.
My views are my own. In any event, that's the first act. We've also met a couple of the servants in the house. There is and this is another one of those things that's semi-tossed off, but again, it creates unease more than anything. The groundskeeper is a black man. The maid is a black woman. And apparently they were there when his father... Oh my gosh, I just connected that. Sorry. They were there when her grandfather passed away, and they stayed on since... that line is now making sense to me and will make sense to you towards the end of this podcast.
Okay. I'm fascinated that just clicked for you.
Like I said,
but you did
finished
just watch
watching
the
this
movie,
thing, okay?
so yeah, all right. I'll give you half credit.
All right. We also find out that the mom is a psychiatrist and that she can hypnotize people into not smoking.
She's a hypnotherapist.
Yes. They say psychiatrist. She knows. Yeah, fuck, sure. It's all true. Nothing's not true.
Everything is permitted.
Thank you. Tuesdays. He goes out to have a smoke at the end of that first day because it's been a day. And not only does he run into the groundskeeper out for his exercise, like the groundskeeper comes at him out of the woods, full on running towards him, and then turns right before he gets to him and then keeps running. So
right.
It's a wonderful scene. But I think he sees the maid as well, right?
Yeah,
that's right. She's like grooming herself in the window.
Yeah, and she's digging through stuff. Yeah.
But he goes back in, and the mom is in there in her study, and she's like, "Hey, have a seat." So he sits down with her, and it's another. It's the first standout scene of the film, and the rest have been standouts, but this is the first one I'm like, holy crap, this hypnotism scene is fantastic, like out of this world good. And then like that happens 10 more times throughout the rest of the film. So it has less meaning at this point to me because this is before I saw the rest of those, but it's still so good. She sits there with the teacup, like just scraping the bottom of it. And this is where I say you kind of see some of this coming. It's kind of telegraphed where, she's just hypnotized a bunch of people, right? Maybe she's hypnotized the servants because they're acting weird, right? That's the first thing you think of, right?
Right.
But that scene where, and this is Catherine Keener, by the way, so no big surprise, but she is like stroking the bottom of this teacup while she talks to him about his mother. And this is where it comes out that his mother died somewhere. I didn't get the circumstances of her death or didn't remember.
Hit and run.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. I knew the deer was to harken back to it at numerous points. I didn't know it was such an exact. Okay. All right. But he's always been devastated by the fact that he called the police and then just sat at home watching TV while they quote unquote did their job, when later on we found out they quote unquote did their job and she bled out on the side of the road. Right. If he had gone out to look for her and found her, he might have been able to save her, type thing, right? And not to toss that off, but that's his psychological thing. And that comes out during this fantastic hypnotism scene. And he falls down to that sunken place, or the sunken place, as they call it, and then wakes up. And was it a dream? Was it not? I think eventually he comes to say that it wasn't, after he tries to speak to the groundskeeper, and he tells him that, I saw you with the mom last night.
Oh no,
we were there for a long time.
He realizes it was true when he tries to smoke a cigarette again, and he's disgusted by it.
Oh, yeah, I didn't catch that actually.
It's nice touch. That's when he goes, okay, that was not a dream.
And then that's also when he goes back into the room and starts to tell his girlfriend about all this. That the uneasiness is percolating. It's coming to the surface to the point where he has to talk to her about it. And there are two confidants in this movie. One of them is the girlfriend, as they work through their relationship especially. But one of them is also his friend back in town, Lil Rel Howery.
Lil Rel.
Rod Williams in the movie. Is the TSA agent, like I said, back in town, and knows that he's headed out to meet his girlfriend's parents, and tells him to not go in that house.
And that character is kind of some of the levity in the movie too. Like the movie.
Oh, it's all of it.
The movie.
No, it's not. Sorry.
The interesting thing about this movie is that for all of the serious things that it's kind of dealing with in its satirical way, it's still very funny. Like,
it's amazing. Yeah.
It's this great combination of creepy and funny and not just the parts with that character, with the TSA agent, with Rel, but there are parts while he is being uneasy in this house with these people that are still kind of, you giggle at them and you're supposed to.
No, totally. And I mean, it's Jordan Peele doing what he does best. This is such a perfect outgrowth of everything he's done. It's sorry. Yes, we could go on. In any event, next we find out that there's is it a yearly party that they have at their house that they've accidentally shown up for the weekend of, and ends up being, a bunch more white people come to their house, and it turns into a parade of sorts where
it's a really funny sequence.
It's a great sequence where they go down, which it almost broke apart for me here, because at one point I was like, why did they even go to this thing? Because they go at first, and I guess slowly he withdraws from it, so it works. It's not that they stayed there and tortured themselves forever. But they show up to this thing, and it is a bunch of old white dudes, and it is this kind of parade of casual racism, wherein, you know, he speaks to one old guy who's like, I was a professional golfer, I knew Tiger, you know, and then they talk to another guy who's like, you know, something, and caps it off with, but now black is in fashion type thing, which is such a great line, because not only is it just the weird, like the just grossest, like, black is in fashion, but it also just says in the same sentence, in the same breath, that black is a fashion.
And of course the pointed piece of the movie, like it's mentioned in that line, and then there's another line that follows it up, and it kind of pulls everything together towards the end when he talks to the photographer who's blind,
Stephen Root,
he's blind, and he was a photographer, a painter, and Daniel Kaluuya's character is a photographer. That's what he does. And there are a couple of notes, but that one in particular, like when you get to the end of the movie and you rethink about that phrasing. Oh,
I've got words. I do.
Yeah.
And again, there's probably so much to all of this that I'm still not getting. You know, I needed to watch Black Panther twice to even get half of that. I can't imagine how many times I got to watch Get Out. But he does meet that other dude, which I didn't recognize as the guy from the beginning of the movie. The beginning of the movie actually starts with a beautifully directed one shot, where the guy's walking through the neighborhood, crosses the street, the car pulls up behind him, and then the guy gets abducted. We see that straight up right off the bat.
Yeah.
He shows up at this party with that older woman and is totally fine, you know, quote unquote fine. And then he runs into Stephen Root, who, yes, is a blind art dealer. But yes, he used to do it before he lost his vision.
Yeah.
Which you connect with him, but it's a short freaking scene, right? You get a couple words, like, you know, he's blind, so you're like, oh, of course, the guy that can't see type thing. And he connects with Chris. And so you think, you know, it's going to be the blind guy that can really see type thing.
Not only that, but you almost begin to think, okay, he is the one that isn't like everybody else. Like he's
right?
he's kind of going to be maybe he's going to be the savior in some way. And you almost think that partially just because he is blind. You're like, okay.
And that scene though is short. Like right when you think maybe that's what they're doing, they're giving you a reprieve, it's cut, but it's cut in favor of him going back to his room and calling his friend back on the phone.
Right.
Who is the real reprieve, right? Like does get to break down everything that's going on. It does get to essentially have what we think the beginning of that conversation was going to be with Stephen Root. So that probably should have been our first clue, I guess, but we will come back to that. We'll get back to that. But the party culminates in Chris coming back and being approached by this Asian dude who asks him the question about whether or not he believes being African American has provided him a disadvantage or an advantage in life. Mm-hmm. And you know, he doesn't so much roll his eyes, but it's, you know, it's kind of like, oof, it's like it's a real moment. And in that moment, he sees the other character, Andre, passing by, Lakeith Stanfield's character that showed up with the older woman that was inducted in the beginning of the movie, and says, hey, why don't you take this one? And while he is answering and basically saying, quote unquote, for the most part, it's been very good, speaking of the African American experience, Chris tries to take a picture of him with his phone. Flash goes off, and it flips Andre, like his nose starts bleeding, and then he kind of attacks Chris and is like, "Oh."
And he says the name of the movie,
and he says, "Get out!" Right? Yeah, thank you.
It's the best part of the film.
It's an amazing part of the film. They're all amazing parts of the film. But the fact that happens in the middle of him saying, you know, that for the most part it's been very good. Like the answer to that question, to about whether or not being African American is an advantage or a disadvantage, like it's a ludicrous question. Like the answer is disadvantage, period. Like there is no question to that. The fact that he breaks in the middle of answering that it has been actually for the most part very good just tells you what this movie is about. It's a key moment. And it comes right before what I'd call the fulcrum of the entire thing, is where, okay, a fulcrum. But they're back up in their room after all this, and now Chris is trying to convince Rose, in maybe the most direct way yet, that something really is going on, that he's not just seeing things in a way. And Rose, throughout the movie, is supposedly the one who does agree with him, right? So this is kind of, when I say fulcrum, it's that, well, number one, it's that thing in the middle of a teeter-totter, but also it's the thing on which part of the movie is teetering, I guess, right?
So and possibly totting, apparently.
I feel like I'm going on forever, though. What? Interrupt me anytime.
Keep going.
I've blown past plenty of things that you have to say.
No, keep going. You're fine.
Okay.
You're laying out the movie. You're hitting all the notes. There's not a lot for me to add. It's just a whole lot of reiteration on my part.
Right. Again, I'm much poorer at this than Jordan Peele is, but let me lay some groundwork.
Sure.
Some more.
I feel like you've been doing it for a while now. Let's keep it up. Keep it up. Never stop.
Okay. But this argument, or not argument or whatever, this discussion they have is also intercut with what we know in no uncertain terms now to be the auction of Chris to all these white guys, right?
Right.
We see it plainly now. There's no uneasiness left. There's plenty of uneasiness, but it's not suggested. It is explicitly stated that they are auctioning. There's a picture of Chris in the background. The dad is up there. I don't know if it's a silent auction or not, but it's silent to us because we're hearing the audio from the discussion up in the bedroom.
Oh yeah,
no, it's intercut with it.
I totally assume it's a silent auction because I don't think any of them are making noise, and I think that there's a perfect purpose behind them not making noise is to not bring him in the backyard where they're doing it.
Fair enough.
Because they're in a freaking backyard, you know.
That's true. They're not that far away.
Okay. Hey, where do you want to purchase a human being? I don't know. Let's go down to the pagoda.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a picture of Chris in the back. It's very obvious that they are auctioning him off, and it's very obvious that Stephen Root wins. Mm-hmm. So the blind art dealer,
his eyes just light up.
They're the window to the soul, Matt. I don't know if you knew this.
I've heard it. I keep my blind shut. So I think now we can push forward and say, okay, we're in the swing of this. Like that. Now we're in the.
We're getting to the third act. I think very possibly.
That home stretch is coming in.
It is, and maybe that's why this is the next. I think there is more that happens, but the very next note I have is kind of the continuation of that conversation in the bedroom where they're at a lakeside, and he's basically saying he's going to leave, and she's like, "Oh, you're going to leave," and she turns around like, "Oh, he's going to leave without her." Like this might be where they break up, and then it cuts away to something else, not auctioning, but something along those lines. And then when it comes back, they seemingly get over the hump, and he talks a little bit more about his mom and what happened to her, and says that he's not going to leave her now because she is all he has. So they seemingly get over the hump, and after he says that, she says, "Okay, let's go. Let's get out of here. Like, I believe you." So they've seemingly come together, and she believes, and there's more going on here than isn't or whatever. But she's like, "Okay, let's go. That's fine." So they go back to their room. They're getting ready to leave. Does he get another call from his friend? Is it?
Yes, because that's when his Rel calls back and says that
that's right,
because he got the photo and he says that's that guy that we knew that guy.
That's right.
He disappeared a couple months ago.
So it ratchets up. Chris is like, "We got to get out of here now. We don't just got to get ready to go. We're leaving now. Like, grab your bag. That's all we're taking. Let's do it." And while she goes off and does that, he, in the closet, there's been a door that he's found open at different times, finds a box full of pictures of her with like 10 other black guys and one black woman being the maid and one of the other guys being the groundskeeper. Mm-hmm. So,
and this matters because previously at the beginning of the film,
yes, right,
she makes they have that discussion. How many other people have you been with? And she says he's the only black man she'd ever been with.
Correct. Yes.
So important point.
Yes. And all those photos actually become even more sinister that I didn't connect. I connected it before just right now, I'll have you know.
Go.
But
prove it.
When you think about where all the other black people in those photos are.
Yeah, well, exactly.
We only see the maid and the groundskeeper.
And we see and Lakeith Stanfield's character.
Right.
Those are the only three out of those photographs. Yeah, it's crazy.
Although he's not, Lakeith Stanfield isn't in those photos because he was not.
Right.
It's explained. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
We'll
because they didn't date. They were, yeah.
Yeah. And upon finding those pictures, he knows obviously that she's in on it as well, even though he appears to at least give her some rope or sees how far she'll carry it out. Because for the moment, she's playing along with him and he needs her to get out.
Name of the movie.
They go downstairs. The rest of the family is there. And we haven't even mentioned that the brother is in the picture too. He's this really passive aggressive to aggressive kind of dude. Like there's a dinner table scene where he shows up and they again, there's some more, there's lots of references to physicality, or I forget how they put it exactly or the words they use, but to his athleticism being genetically superior,
right,
type thing, you know. It plays all into the whole specimen thing. Like he's treated like a specimen. He's paraded around like a piece of meat or whatever.
Yeah.
Or an object is the word I'm looking for.
Sure.
But they get downstairs. Everybody's there, and he looks like is going to fight the brother to get out. I gotta just stop saying that, honestly.
Movie title.
But all Catherine Keener has to do is tap the tea glass, and he falls over flat on his back because he's been hypnotized. He wakes up. This is where it's all hopping off. We're either deep or completely into the third act at this point. He wakes up in a chair where he eventually sees a video, and this is where it all gets spoiled. It all gets explained to us. Well, actually, it doesn't get completely explained. It gets perfectly explained in a way that keeps you going, but we are going to perfectly explain it for all you guys. So if you don't want this part of it spoiled, and I think it is fantastic, but although it's not going to lessen the enjoyment of the film, we find out through a video, Project Coagula, which when I say is perfectly explained, there was still a little bit of a question as to what exactly, but that comes across in the next thing that he sees on the TV, which is actually Stephen Root in a hospital bed, who explains that the grandfather pioneered and the son perfected, it seems, this process of transferring consciousnesses between bodies.
Right.
And there was a point for a split second where Stephen Root is explaining all this, and I'm like, man, they're having to resort to a lot of straight up and explicit exposition, even that I was almost like, it's almost too much. But the way that conversation plays out between him and Chris, between Stephen Root, and it's not Stephen Root, it's his character. Again, Stephen Root is not evil.
Well, we don't know that.
Between him and Chris,
pan shot
is so good. It's just so good.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I'm glad it's all in there. I don't even care how much talking it is.
Yeah, no, and they're great sequences, and that whole bit at the end where he does, it's funny because you do hear that, and it's almost it is very much it's the evil villain monologuing, right? But I think that it also serves in a kind of a funny way because the videos are like 50s style educational videos.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's like
VHS
a bit of
tapes. They got to be too.
Right. Yeah. So
the conversation with Stephen Root is a back and forth. There's an intercom, but it looks like it's on the same TV, right? Yeah.
Right. But the video of the grandfather and everything, it just seems like it's a good scene. It's a great sequence.
It is. And we should also mention that while that's happening, the friend has ratcheted it up. The TSA friend has taken it to the police, and there's this amazing. I laughed so hard at this when he goes to the actual police, because he's convinced the plot is that these white people are abducting black people and making them sex slaves, and he let that drop for Chris a couple times too. But he goes into the police, and very professionally at first, he finds a black female detective and starts to tell her this story. Like first of all, he's like, my boy's missing. And she's like, your son's missing? She takes out a pen and paper like she's going to write it down. And he's like, no, it's just my friend. He's been gone for 2 days. And then she stops and she just looks at him. He's like, no, he was going out to his girlfriend's parents' house and she's still not writing anything down. And then he says, she's white. And then she kind of looks down. She's like, okay, go on. Like, all right, something's happening here. But it's such a good mini scene because at that point you realize there's a connection. Like there's a shared experience, obviously. And that got through to her. But then as he gets more comfortable, he lets the whole black slave thing slip. And there's a moment, there's a pause that's so good where you're like, okay, you want to know how far that shared experience is going to take him, because he's going off the deep end, but it's hilarious. And it is there. Comedy lands with different people because of different experiences. And in this moment, in this pause where the friend is going off the deep end and talking about, starting to lay the groundwork about how he thinks that sex slaves, you're like, either she is going to completely blow it off at this point or she's going to buy in. And then she gets these other two guys that come in and he finishes explaining and then they all laugh at him and he goes away without any police help. Right. But there's there's something in that, and it's in a couple other tossed off lines where they talk about at the very beginning how they're dressed. She makes some comment about like how I'd never used to dress like this either. And basically the question becomes, how systematized is she? How much has the system, or has she bought into the system? And there's a moment where you think, because she's believing him, that she hasn't, that she can still believe in this seemingly fantastical stuff. I'm doing a bad job, I'm sure, but the fact that it teeters on that and that she ends up blowing it all off is, again, I laughed out loud and also had these thoughts about it. And
fair enough.
But the friend is on the job, I guess, is the point we should take away here, while Chris has been, is in the depths of it now.
Right. Rel knows something's wrong, and Rel is on his way.
And maybe this is now where we get into the Stephen Root character and what that ends up being, how dark that ends up becoming, where you think, and I don't remember where I finally actually thought this, but yes, there's a moment during that conversation where I was like, why at any point did I think Stephen Root was a savior of sorts at all?
Right.
Not that he would be the one that saves everybody, but there's a moment where they connect and he's the blind guy and you think, oh, okay, maybe he's part of the way out. At this point, you're like, why? Of course, why would he be? Why would I even think that for a second?
Right.
Like, not only is he not that, he's the worst. Like, he says so much then, and at some point, Chris asks him, why black people? And he's like, oh, who the hell knows? Because some people want to be stronger, want to be faster, want to be cooler, speaking about how their consciousness is being transferred to black people. But Stephen Root doesn't care about any of that and says as much, right? He's seemingly not racist, albeit maybe psychotic. But it's not that he's not racist. It's that he's the heart. He's the whole oxymoronic heart of racism. This whole thing about black people being inferior somehow, and yet them wanting to be better people by being them, type thing.
Right.
He ends up being the colonizer, man. Like, this movie is a perfect cross between Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and Body Snatchers, right?
Sure.
Stephen Root is just the actual colonizer, the guy who doesn't care, who doesn't even think maybe even about it that much, just is the most evil of all of it, I guess, is the crazy thing.
And I mean, it's partially it's the laissez-faire attitude he has towards the whole thing too. It's
great, right?
Whether or not he's racist or not almost doesn't matter. And he says as much. He's like, it doesn't matter if it's black people. It's not the point. The point is that we want to be something we're not to get something we don't have for whatever reason. Like he's now blind, so he wants his vision back. That's all he wants.
That's true, and that's what he said. That's what I want for you are those eyes. Or actually, no, what he says is more pointed than that. He wants those things you see through. Right. And you're right. It's not, in fact, this is maybe where we started when we talked about casual racism. He is like the extremist casual racism ever, right? It's not that casual racism doesn't exist, that he's not a racist. It's that there's no such thing but straight up racism, I guess. And that's maybe hard to buy in a way from people that you want to be like, like my actual grandpa, who wasn't a Klansman or anything like that, but, came from an era and is of it. And was racist,
Right.
Like it's so good. It's just, there's so many freaking layers to it.
Not the grandpa being racist. But
no,
the movie.
That is bad.
Yeah, the movie is good.
Yes, the movie is good. Racism bad.
Yeah. So we get to the point now where they've had their discussion, and Chris has to figure out what he's going to do, if he's going to be able to do anything. He's taped to this chair. The video continues playing. They start trying to hypnotize him again, And
Well, he's still susceptible to that. Like one of the videos
Right.
ends with the tea glass and he goes under completely into the sunken place.
right.
So he is still susceptible to that.
He figures out that while he's under, he's scratching, and it was something that is brought up earlier in the film too. He's scratching at the chair. He finds there's some like cotton in there, and so he stuffs it in his ears so that
Right.
the hypnotism doesn't kick in anymore.
Although he plays like it does, because that's when the brother comes in to take him to the operating room where Stephen Root's, this is all intercut with Stephen Root's scalp and skull being cut off and brain being taken out
Yeah. Well,
and thrown in the garbage, which is pretty great if you think about it.
just yeah. What do you don't need it anymore. It's a waste. But that yeah. So the brother comes in. Chris is able to get out. Name of the movie.
Oh, there it is again.
Of the of being he's able to escape. Essentially, he kills the brother. He impales.
Well, he knocks the brother out with a croquet ball or something.
Right.
Lawn bowling, something rather.
Yeah, the brother dies. The best part about this
He gets
is
knocked out.
it's so irrelevant. He dies at the end.
He does die at the end. But he
That's-
comes back.
It doesn't.
It matters. I know I'm driving you freaking nuts, but it matters in the brutality that the third act embraces. That Chris embraces in the third act. I'm sorry. Please continue. I have definitely talked. Just go.
No, you know what? It's fine. I'm just trying to get through this because I
Yes,
gotta
we all
get
are.
done with
Yes,
this.
that's the problem.
At the end of this, Chris kills everybody basically. Yeah, he brutally murders the brother. He impales Bradley Whitford on the horns of a deer,
Right.
bringing us back to that.
It's been staring at him.
And that's when we're led to the kind of the big ending where Chris is going to go take his car and he's going to leave. And go ahead.
I'm sorry. I apologize. The brother comes back. He stabs him in the foot. There's a struggle. He stabs the mom in the well, we don't see it, but in the eye and or brain somehow, like through the temple, most likely.
Right.
It's freaking brutal and bloody. And in any other movie where the protagonist does this, he loses, right? Like this is not how a protagonist acts. Like the protagonist pulls it back before this. And there is a moment later on where he has to confront the girl where he does pull back. But it's the brutality that I think it's meaningful. Obviously, this whole movie is meaningful, but forgive me for talking too much, but also interrupting.
No, it's earned. It's just
It is.
like it's just not. I don't know. I guess it's just, to me, it's not worth getting that far into the weeds on the brutality in terms of. It's more interesting the very ending sequences in the road where.
Yes.
Where now he's seen the black woman, she's the maid.
Oh, that's so good.
And,
Such a good scene.
And the maid is hurt, and he sees her, like she got.
He accidentally hits her. She jumps out in front of the car like the deer. Yeah.
Right. And then just like mom thinking about, he picks her up, puts her in the back of the car. And when he does that, he gets in the car. We find out that the grandmother is still inside of her.
It's so good.
Which causes a big fight between them, and then is it Lakeith?
That's also the moment where, when I say the protagonist doesn't do this normally, like he can't. Like if he really were far gone and this really was, the turning of the protagonist, he would have left the girl on the side of the road, but he can't. He hasn't got past that. He sees his mom bleeding out on the side of the road and can't leave her. But It's that moment where he does rescue the maid, puts her in the car and driving away. And the daughter comes out, his girlfriend comes out of the house and sees them and says, "Grandma." And I'm like, oh, it's freaking grandma.
It's
in there.
grandma.
Gosh dang it, it's grandma.
It's grandma. And then I don't remember, I'm blanking on how, I can't remember the order of events after.
Grandma wakes up, steers him into a tree, which gives the girlfriend time to catch up with
a shotgun.
Grandpa.
Right, grandpa. That's right. And somebody's got a gun. One of them has.
She has a gun. Yeah,
she has a gun.
Girlfriend has a gun.
And the grandfather's gonna choke because grandmother's dead now because they got into the car accident. She
Correct.
dies. Grandpa starts trying to choke Chris out, and Chris ends up taking a picture of him,
Right,
which
flash.
causes him to. The flash goes off. It causes him to kind of remember who he is. He ends up with the gun, and he shoots himself.
Well, he turns around to the girl immediately and is like, "Let me do it." And she's like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, right. That's
Gives
right.
him the gun, to which he doesn't even fake it. He just shoots her immediately.
Shoots her in the
gut.
stomach.
Yeah.
And then shoots himself.
And then he does shoot himself. Yes. Just boom, boom, man. Good gosh, the ending of this film.
And then we're left with a dying white woman in the middle of the street. A cop car pulls up.
Well, and this is where he also pulls back. He goes back and almost chokes her to death. Like, he has his hands around her.
Right.
And because she tries to pull the whole "I love you" thing.
That's
whatever.
right. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
And when she starts getting this maniacal laugh on her face as he's choking her to death is when he finally does pull back. But yes, then a cop car pulls up. And this whole time, like, you're knowing how this is all going to play out. Like, if anybody walks up, especially in this movie, if anybody walks up on this sequence, this brutal, like, this path of destruction that he's laid across the entire system, as he leaves, like, any cop comes up on that and he's going to jail, right? Like, he's getting shot.
Which in the there are multitude of endings that were filmed.
Really?
Yes. And
shoot. Okay.
They're available on the Blu-rays and stuff as extended.
All right,
in this case, the cop car pulls up, and if you were like, for me, in the theater, I'm like, this is how it has to end. It has to. He has to go to jail. He has to.
But it's enough that you think that. Like, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's a kindness. Like, Jordan Peele was kind to us. Like, he could have done it the other way, But he's
he did.
I guess yes. He hadn't made his decision yet.
So the car pulls up, and then Rel gets out of the car and is like, "Man, I told you."
Right. Yeah. It's his friend.
And at the end of so in the other there were two other endings that were filmed. One of them was a cop does show up, and the ending of the film is Rel talking to him in prison and asking him for more information, and Chris just saying, "I took care of it. It's done. Don't worry about it. It's over." The other ending was Rel showing up to the house, knocking on the door, Chris answering the door, and him saying, "Chris, we got to go," or something, and then Chris saying, "I have absolutely no idea who you're talking to or who you're talking about."
Oh, God, what? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, you know what? I think he went with the right ending.
So two reasons. One, test audiences didn't love the other ending, and he felt watching this, he was like, this deserves a happy ending. So I'm going to give it a happy ending.
Quote unquote happy. Because the real ending, I want to say the final shot is his girlfriend bleeding out on the side of the road.
Yeah.
The movie is about the things we leave bleeding out on the side of the road. Right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Humans, deer, that's it.
It's the actual thing. That is everything that it's about. Mm-hmm. Get out.
Get out.
So good.
How many stars?
I don't think I have enough of them. Hold on, let me check. See, this is why I shouldn't have given 5 million stars to whatever the other movie was that I gave 5 million stars to.
Well, 5,000,005.
5 million and 5 stars.
Out of 5,000,003 stars.
Get out, everybody. Podcast at bookclubformovies.com. Thanks if you listened to this. Thanks if you watched that. It's really good. The movies are good, everybody.
Movies are good.
Again, apologies. Get back to us with what we got wrong and what we could do better about this. We're open to correction. We need it to survive.
Yeah, criticize us badly.
Please. Criticize the criticizers. That's the only way we're all going to get out of this alive.
It's not a fetish, but it could be.
Should be.
All right, it is now. Done!
Hey, that's all it takes.
Hey, what are we doing for next week?
Oh, we haven't talked about that yet, Matt.
Well, then I guess it's going to be Balls of Fury.
What is that?
With Dan Fogler and Christopher Walken and Aisha Tyler and Diedrich Bader and...
Ping Pong one?
Ping Pong.
Okay.
No, we don't have to watch that.
Really? Is that like... I feel like you don't just pull that out of a hat. Is that what you really want to do?
No, I did just pull it out of a hat because I was thinking...
Oh, really? That's just at the forefront of your mind.
I was thinking about it the other day because I saw a picture of Patton Oswalt and he has like this weird little moment in there where... And I don't even want to talk about it because if you haven't seen it,
I've seen it, but it's been about a a long time.
It's like 2 seconds long where Patton Oswalt's the weird ping pong champion in like a high school, but he's like at one point he has to like he comes in and he's got like a manager with him, like a huge big buff manager, and he gives him his inhaler and he like takes a hit and he's like like he just took like the best hit ever, and he's like don't help.
Okay.
No,
did we just talk about the best? Did we just do a show on that movie right now? Just hearing that, I feel like. Okay. In all seriousness, because we're very serious on this podcast.
Always.
Is there a show in it? I guess is my main question. Because comedies are comedies. Like maybe is there 30 to 40 minutes on that movie for us?
8 minutes of that movie.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe we rested the show that one. Did you just watch it recently? We can just do that.
I in fact did watch it. I watched it just the other night.
Wait, that was on your list for the rest of the show today before we deleted it, wasn't it? That's what's happening here.
Maybe.
You got me, Amberg.
Ha, sucker. Now, what do you want to watch? What movie?
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Have you ever seen
The Rain?
This is the sad part being this is from my rest of the show that's still, what are we, 4 shows deep on it, the movies I watched over the break?
Yeah.
But there is absolutely a show in this thing. I don't know if it's his first, but it's one of his earliest. Have you seen Rian Johnson's Brick?
Oh, man. Absolutely. I haven't seen that in a while. We could do Brick. Great movie.
Let's do Brick.
Love that movie. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Even hearing it explained to me didn't explain it to me.
Oh, and it's perfect as soon as you once you watch it, the explanation makes perfect sense.
It does. Yeah. There's a key to it that Brick next week, everybody. Watch it.
It's good. Brick.
On Book Club for Movies. Or don't watch it on Book Club watch it for Book Club for Movies.
You do whatever you want. You're an American citizen.
That's true. You can do whatever you want. Facebook, Twitter, let us know all about it. Goodbye.
Bye.